One of the biggest artists in the world, The Weeknd, is back with a brand new album, Hurry Up, tomorrow.
This album is serving as his final project as The Weeknd, and it's also the final installment to his trilogy, which he's been having going on recently, which was After Hours in 2020, Dawn FM in 2022, and finishing with this one. But it's a very long album, running in at just under an hour and a half long, so let's jump straight into it with the first track, which is Wake Me Up, featuring Justice.
Justice. I absolutely love Justice. Legends. But this is a really cool, epic sounding introduction to the album. I think it builds up the sound well, and then there's a little kind of beat switch where it proper kicks in about at the halfway point. Incredible. Thought it was a very good track.
Really good track. I really enjoyed it. You know, when Justice are on there, it's going to be phenomenal. But one thing that I did think was listening to it, it kind of had like an influence from Michael Jackson era of sounds. It sounded a little bit thrillery, which I really liked. Really enjoyed that. We'll move on to the next track, which is Cry For Me, which had a really cool transition from the first track into it.
See, I thought that this was a kind of much heavier, more serious sounding instrumental, and I liked that. I liked that. I felt at least that it switched up even within those tracks. But in terms of content, lyrical content, etc., this was a very stereotypical Weeknd heartbreak track.
Yeah, there's the odd beat dropout where it kind of just makes things a little bit more serene, and then all of a sudden the beat kicks back in, it comes back in hard, and it just sounds phenomenal.
Yeah, the instrumental was great in moments, but I do think that it was just decent. Do you know what I mean? It didn't have that much content that would have me going back and revisiting it. It's certainly not one of the Weeknd's best tracks, but we'll move on to Sao Paulo.
So this is featuring Anita, and I think it kind of has a little bit of a funk beat. Now, personally, I'm not massively in the world of funk. It seems like quite a new...
Funk?
It seems like quite a new genre that's kind of hit the scene. I don't know if it's like Latin American or something. It feels like it's from that region, but I really enjoyed it with The Weeknd. His style on this sounded amazing.
Yeah, I liked the Brazilian woman, the random Brazilian lyrics that were coming in there. I thought that added a different element to the song, and as you say, it gave it kind of a completely different sound versus what we've heard in the previous two tracks. But one thing I wanted to bring up, I don't know if you'll feel the same, to me this felt like a very Yeezus-esque production.
There's a few tracks in this album where I've written like, oh, a little bit Kanye influenced maybe. There's a bit of that in there. This track personally I think sounded like the Tokyo Drift song a little bit.
And when I did a little bit of research after listening to this track, turns out Mike Dean, who was a big part of Yeezus and a lot of Year projects, is one of the producers, and then Travis Scott is one of the others, and obviously Travis learned from Kanye in the Yeezus era, and there was lots of kind of references to Yeezus throughout his last album. So maybe a little bit of a stolen sound there from The Weeknd.
Very possibly, yeah. It wouldn't surprise me, but we'll move on to, it's an interlude, which is Until We're Skin and Bones, which serves nicely for closing the last track, and then we jump into the next full track, which is Baptized in Fear. And oh my God, The Weeknd has such a beautiful voice, man.
He does. You could say this for so many songs throughout this album. His vocal abilities are definitely up there with the best. This was much more chill compared to what we've just had in the last two songs, and even that weird anxiety building interlude. I like the fact, took it down a note, gave me a moment to relax. You need that in an album.
Yeah, you can't really say much more than that, so we'll move on to Open Hearts, which the transition into this, god damn, I'm going to say that so many times throughout this album, because transitions is something that has clearly been thought out throughout this whole process, and I really enjoy it when a song just flows into the next one.
Do you know, for me, it felt a little bit forced sometimes. Maybe not in this example, but sometimes I do think that they added an interlude or changed the end of a song just for the flow of the album. And obviously that's a positive the majority of the time, but I'm not sure how I felt about it in some aspects here, because it was like if you were just listening to the individual song, the ending just wouldn't make any sense. But I suppose it's been made as an album. And on Open Hearts, I thought it was a very kind of video game-esque instrumental. It kind of reminded me of something that would play in the background of Ready Player One.
Yeah, so I thought it sounded a bit Gambino-y almost. It kind of sounded like Heartbeat, which, you know, I quite liked. So I enjoyed that. And there was a lot going on, but it felt like it was very reserved at the same time. It's a difficult one for me to kind of describe, but a lot of instruments and a lot of elements, but still very simplistic.
Yeah, I really liked the random keys that would pop in and out throughout this track, but we'll move on anyway onto Opening Night, which again is more of an interlude, but it serves its purpose.
Yeah, it's 1:30 long, and I would have loved for this to be a full-pledged track, because I think this had so much potential. If you'd have just like expanded it out to maybe 3 minutes or so, it would have been great, but it works for what it needed to do.
Reflections of Laughing is up next. Tim, what did you think of this?
So this is featuring Travis Scott and Florence Florence from Florence and the Machine, which is the craziest feature list ever. I never thought The Weeknd would collaborate with Florence and the Machine, but when I think about it, it makes a lot of sense.
I feel like this was much more focused on vocals. The vocals are always nice, but to be honest, I think that those features could have been used in a better way. I don't think that this was the song I anticipated it to be when you see that list of people.
I think in the latter half as well, there's like a deep voice filter, which can be a bit overused. On this track, it didn't sound too bad. I did think it suited the track, but for me, it feels worn out.
It just didn't feel real. It didn't feel like a real song because of those filters and effects on the voices. But we'll quickly move on to Enjoy the Snow.
Enjoy the show, I think.
Oh.
I don't think it's snow. It
Oh,
might be
correct.
snow. Either way, it doesn't matter. This is featuring Future. It's not really my cup of tea. It's not quite what I'd listen to, but I do appreciate the track. There's not a whole lot going on for me, but it is classic Weeknd style.
Similar to the previous track, it was very focused on vocals again, and you've kind of got Future trying to sing in moments, and that is far from his strong point. So again, I'd actually say the feature wasn't used particularly well here, in my opinion.
Sounds like you've given up on Future, so we'll move on to Giving Up on Me, which is another classic Weeknd track. Again, not really my thing, but I do appreciate the stylistic choices. There's a beat switch about halfway through that was very unexpected for me, and it kind of left the track on a somber note, which I enjoyed.
There was a middle section where it went to practically just piano and vocals, which I really liked. That was the strongest part of the song for me. There was a really strange ending though, where it kind of built down to nothing. I know you can't build down, but anyway, I thought that they ended it on a strange note.
Yeah, I don't know. I quite enjoyed it, to be honest, but you can't wait to get out of this track, and I can't wait to get out of there. I've absolutely butchered that. But Jesus Christ. This immediately felt a bit like a Tyler, the Creator beat, and I hate that I'm having to make references, but it's just how my brain works. I hear a song and I go, that kind of sounds like this other artist, but I really enjoyed it. It's another track where The Weeknd just sounds absolutely beautiful. He's just such a good vocalist.
The Weeknd does sound absolutely beautiful, as always, but at this point, to be honest, I felt like the last couple of tracks have kind of molded together for me. There isn't too many unique elements in them. They're all very chill, very focused on vocals, which I appreciate, and that's not to say they're bad songs, but I was waiting for a little something different. I was waiting for a new style instrumental, a different type of vocals, and this song didn't really deliver that for me.
Maybe some of the tracks so far haven't been timeless, but the next track definitely is timeless, featuring Playboi Carti. Now, this was produced by Pharrell Williams, and as soon as I saw that, I thought, this is going to be a phenomenal track, and I wasn't wrong. I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, the beat on this goes hard, instantly memorable, really liked the instrumental, but I don't know if this is a controversial take. Playboi Carti's a weird guy, man.
I'm very surprised that he even got a feature from Playboi Carti, because he notoriously doesn't do anything.
But I just don't get him. I appreciate that like some of his albums are quite good and his live show is meant to be pretty chaotic. But when someone gets Playboi Carti in the studio, what do they say to him? Like just go feral on the mic for a couple. Like he's just in the background going, yeah, homicide, yeah. And I'm like, what is going on? Why is he always doing this?
I had no idea. I don't know, but I do think that for this track it worked. It did quite well. The Weeknd's part on this was a little bit repetitive. It felt like the latter half didn't really have much going on, but let's move off it onto Niagara Falls, which again is another classic Weeknd track. I like the vibes, but there's not really a whole lot going on.
No, I mean, I think it was quite a nice sounding song in terms of there were little background noises and effects and different things coming in and out sometimes, but it was a relatively simple song. For me, Niagara Falls is just an album song.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's not bad, it's not great, and we'll move on to Take Me Back to LA.
Never take me back to LA. I absolutely hate it. But again, I don't tell me if you feel the same. A lot of this album just sounds like the same track to me, where I know I get it, he's a good vocalist and it can't always be super different, but I'd say like the first couple songs were all like, oh, this sounds new, and then it's just got to the point where it's like a chill beat and The Weeknd's
I think he becomes a bee, a mosquito flying around. I think what they've done is they've kind of done like all the unique songs in the first section and the end section. This middle bit is a bit of a lull. It does kind of like, in terms of energy and me listening and actively being able to listen, it does go up and down, the middle being the lowest point.
Yeah, like I'm not saying it's bad. It's like in Take Me Back to LA, there's some parts of it, especially in the latter section of the song, where there's some like big overreaching background vocals that mix in really well with The Weeknd's usual vocals. It still sounds good, but I just was a bit bored.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that because I really enjoyed this track. I love the beat. Like, I love the beat on this track. And for me, it's an all-around great track from vocals all the way down to the production, all the way to beat. Everything was great.
Well, it didn't make you want to big sleep, but did the next song.
So very good. This is featuring Giorgio Moroder, who I personally haven't heard of before, but you know, quite a good feature. I didn't expect the beat switch to happen so quick on this track. I feel like there was like 20-25 seconds at the beginning, and then it went boom straight into something. And to me, that kind of felt like what happened was the first bit is him being awake, with the track being called Big Sleep, and then after about 30 seconds is when he falls asleep and he starts dreaming, and the track changes entirely.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that vibe, actually. I didn't recognize it as that in the moment, but I think that's a good explanation. I thought this track was awful. The first little section was bad, and then the last half just felt like a weird experiment that they never quite finished, in my opinion.
I thought the production went crazy on this. Like, the synth on this track is unbelievable. And to be fair, the synth throughout this album is unbelievable. To be fair, I mean, The Weeknd always brings amazing synth work to his music, so it's nothing new. But again, I think it's noteworthy on this particular track.
Let's agree to disagree and move on to Give Me Mercy.
This feels like one of the more religious coded tracks on the album, based on the lyrics and also just the general feel of it.
Yeah, it was very light. It felt like there was a few religious references in there. But I actually thought, compared to previous, it was quite nice to have a moment of feeling happy. Do you know what I mean? Everything else is very much like, I've got my heart broken, this girl hates me, I'm stuck in LA or something. This one was like, oh, nice, cool.
Very, very introspective. For me, it's not really my cup of tea again. I'll say that a couple of times throughout this album, so I didn't really have much to say on it, but I did enjoy it. So we'll move on to Drive, which has an initial wob, is the only way I can describe it. There's a little low-end bass going on, and I absolutely adore it.
Do you adore this song, though?
The beat's better than the song.
I thought it was pretty missable, again, to be honest. It was okay. It existed. I think a lot of this album I wouldn't particularly want to re-listen to, but it's not particularly bad. Over the first half I would re-listen to, but by this point, this song was just, I've got one line for it. It's just missable.
Oh, fair. I mean, I like the fact that this builds up to something major, and then right at the end, it all just dies off. It just gets to a point, and then it like nicely sets the scene. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it, but I just like the way it builds up and then dies off entirely. I love it when songs do that. So let's move on to The Abyss, featuring Lana Del Rey.
Our favourite artist.
What a surprise, though. I never expected that.
Again, I would say the feature was used relatively poorly, maybe better than some of the other tracks, but it still wasn't. I don't know, I feel like all the features in all these tracks have been an afterthought. That's the vibe I've got. Like, obviously it's not listed on the streaming services who the features actually are, which is always weird. Like, is bro trying to be Kanye? But then it was, I don't know, none of them felt like the songs were particularly tailored for the features. They all felt like really chill tracks that weren't designed to particularly do well.
So on this track in particular, I made a note of, these vocals are phenomenal. Whoever this female is needs more credit. And then when I looked into it and went Lana Del Rey, I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But it's a good point of, why do people gatekeep the features for like the first week? And then after the first week, all the features are on there. Eminem's done it recently. Kanye does it a lot. And then eventually they'll put the feature lists on. But why not do that from the get-go? Is there a reason for that?
Maybe it's so people start searching for the album and looking into it, so that then there's more hype around it and more people actually looking around the internet to find out what's going on. But I actually would agree. Lana's vocals were good, but it just, I don't know, all the features on this album just felt a bit thrown into me. But we'll move on to the next track, which is Red Terror.
Now, this would have gone hard with a Kanye feature, because this 100% feels like something out of Kanye's playbook. It doesn't really feel like it does much in the first section, but then the outro at around 3 minutes, that really caught me off guard. I didn't expect that to happen at all.
Yeah, that weird talking was just like, I don't know how I felt about it. I liked it in the moment, but it was a strange song. It's not a song you'd put on all the time. No. Cool test though. Again, something different. Love to see that. So we'll go on to Without a Warning.
Another amazing transition, and this album is just a masterclass in transitions, in my opinion. The bass on this track is filth. Absolutely disgusting. I love it.
I really liked the way that this song kind of switched the vibes up multiple times throughout it. Obviously, the instrumental, again, kicks in really nicely about the halfway point. I feel like that's happened on a fair few tracks throughout this album. I thought that this was a fantastic track.
This could have been used for something like a cinematic trailer, I felt like, when I was listening to it. The drums work really nicely. There's a little snare and hi-hat that are going throughout, and the cheering crowd at the the end is usually something that I would find quite cheesy. But for this track, it felt like he was giving himself a round of applause and saying, you know what, I've done a phenomenal album. I'm going to add a little bit of cheering in there. And it worked. I liked it.
And we're on to the final track of the album. Before you find out if we give it a round of applause, remember to hit like and subscribe. We review all the latest big albums from all the genres across the music space, so hit the buttons. But the last track, surprisingly, is actually the title track, which I don't see very often, and it is Hurry Up Tomorrow.
This is so serene. This is so drawn back, and I think it's a very different to anything else that we've heard on this album up until this point.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of the perfect way to take the album out. The instrumental was interesting enough. The vocals were really good. A few moments with a bit more energy, but not too much. Just took me down on a nice note.
The organ throughout it, I really liked. I really like the use of organs in songs. I don't know what it is. I feel like it's quite rare, but when it's used right, it sounds phenomenal. And a fun fact about this track is that it actually loops around. The ending makes it run into High for This, which is the first track off his first album. So he's done a full loop, which is why him saying this is the retirement of The Weeknd, it may actually be the retirement of The Weeknd.
That is really cool. I didn't know that. But Tim, give me some thoughts on the album as a whole. Obviously, a massive project. It's one that a lot of people are going to be interested in, and a lot of people are going to be glazing just because it's The Weeknd. But what did you think?
I thought it was a really good culmination of all of his styles and all of his eras, so to speak, that he's done throughout the years. He's brought them all into one project, and I do think that this is like his pièce de la résistance, or whatever you call it. I don't know what the word is for it. I think this is his coup de grace.
So when you say that, do you mean that you think that this is his best album?
I think this is him putting all of his eggs into one basket and saying, this is who I've been throughout my entire discography. This is who I am as an artist, and he's managed to pipe all of that into one phenomenal track list.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of different sounds which just kind of point to that for me. I liked a lot of this album, but a lot of it I thought was a little bit uninspired. Not particularly in terms of instrumentals, more in terms of lyrics. It was more phoned in. There wasn't many parts where I was like, oh, that's a deeper topic that I'm really interested to hear about The Weeknd explore. However, saying that, I feel like I've been a little bit of a hater on it, but I'm not really. The first half was really good. I really liked a lot of the more experimental tracks on here. And even the more chill tracks, I think maybe I'm slightly bored of just hearing The Weeknd sing over a chill beat, and that's my problem. But it's still good. The vocals are still good, and the production's still good. So I think even on the worst tracks, in my opinion, they're still not bad songs, really.
Yeah, I think that everything is listenable. I don't think there's really many skips in this album if you're listening to it as an album. I think you have to listen to the whole thing in one. And it is a long album, so it takes a lot. But one thing I just want to give a shout out for is the production throughout this album. The production and the synths are just absolutely phenomenal. Whoever's been working on that, amazing. And like I say, a contender for a no skip with a 22-song album. That's pretty impressive, I can't lie.
I wouldn't say it's a contender for a no skip. I'd say there's 3 or 4 missable songs in here. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, I'm not saying they're awful songs. They're just missable. I think, as you alluded to earlier, the first section and the last section of the album were unreal. But then I think there was a middle section that really let it down a bit for me. But before I give my rating, Tim, do you have any more points?
Yeah, I just want to say that I do think that this is already, we're in January. I think this may be a heavy contender for Album of the Year. I would not be surprised if it topped a lot of people's charts. So I'm going to pass it over to you and ask you, Joe, what rating would you give this album out of 10?
You're really not going to be impressed now.
Oh, no.
I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10.
A 6? Joe, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. I'm not even a Weeknd glazer, and I can appreciate that this album is a work of art.
The album is a work of art, but not all works of art are amazing throughout. There was good elements, there was boring elements, there was some bad elements. A lot of it is fine. A lot of it is very good, but for me, dragged on a little bit. Some of the interludes and the interlinking of songs felt a little bit forced. Not to take away from the great tracks on there. The features weren't used to the full potential, in my opinion. And I actually think Dawn FM, The Weeknd's previous album, is much better than this.
That's a very strong take to give. And I will give my rating now, which I'm going to come in at an 8 out of 10. I genuinely think this is a phenomenal album. I think it's a masterclass in pretty much every aspect of album creation, from transitions, from track listing to production to beats to vocals. Everything throughout it I thought was really well polished. And you can tell that so much thought has been put into this.
Yeah, an 8 out of 10. I get why you would give it that. I was just bored by the end. But if you've got to the end of this video, then do remember, I ask again, hit like and subscribe. If you're listening at this point or watching, whatever you're doing, you must have at least kind of enjoyed the review. So hit the buttons.
Yeah, stick around, see what we've got. We do everything, every genre. You'll see everything on our channel. Thank you very much for watching.